Y'all gonna hate me for this one. That's right, ladies and boys. We're going to be taking a look at a medieval.
Wait, why are people going to hate you?
Because...
Oh, wait, I know. Is it because of your rotund size and your mental deficiency?
No, it has nothing to do with that, Cortana.
Oh, it's because of your micro.
Nope. We're not talking about that. I'm not ever going to talk about how you walked in on me in the shower ever again.
It was so traumatic. It was like a thimble shoved in the middle of ground beef.
Shut up.
Or a small pebble in the middle of a mudslide.
No, Cortana, it has absolutely nothing to do with anything you're saying, as per usual.
Sorry, it's not my fault you're a disgusting bag of taint mush.
At some point, I do want to talk about this game.
Well, by all means, don't let me get in your way. I am always here for support if you need me. Toodaloo!
Fine, whatever. You're never any help anyways. But anyways, you know what? My penis isn't that small, guys. I mean, it's good. It's like a good, average, solid penis. It's not that bad. Anyways, a medieval. There's going to be some hate coming my direction because of this game. Absolutely. And some of it I might deserve. Because by all accounts, this is considered a masterpiece, an absolute peak of gaming experience. And I kind of have to disagree with that. I don't hate the game by any means. In fact, there's a lot of times where I'm thinking that this is the peak of gaming experience. But there's just one nagging issue that's constantly eating me away when I think about that. And it's this idea that Boomershooters can't do story. And this game is like ripe for a good, deep, dark fantasy sci-fi story. I've been watching the show Shangri-La Frontier. It's like an anime where all the characters are in this video game that's fantasy meets sci-fi. And I see that show and I'm just in it and I'm eating it up and the lore's behind every corner. And it's kind of got these like nods to Dark Souls and other weird RPGs of its kind. And then I look at this game and I see those same nods here and that obscure references that you get from like notes and some stuff off the wall. But there's also like a deeper lore that you can get front and center, which like Shangri-La Frontier will do at times. And I've played other games that will hit you with the big story up front, and then I'll like downplay some of the side stuff, or have like at least a voice protagonist to kind of explain what's going on. Because like that's the big problem in this game. After a certain point, you feel like you're just running through missions to get to the next cool boss battle, which is cool. The gameplay's phenomenal, which we'll get to all the good that I like about this game. But when it comes to the actual nitty gritty of what to do, you feel like you're just constantly doing stuff. You're just there experiencing the game. Sure, it's fun, but it way stays past its welcome. Every mechanic that you grew to like in the early game, in the platforming that you liked, by the time you get toward the end of this game, you don't want to fucking do it anymore. You don't want to be here. You would rather be playing with your taint, slapping your clitoris vibrantly, than sitting here playing a medieval. And I feel like I might be out in the outskirts saying this with my little bullhorn like an asshole that I am, just like tongue fucking it to death. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not in the minority here. I feel like there's more people to look at this game and like, yeah, it's really long, and it actually isn't that long. It's just there's nothing of substance to keep you pushing forward. Trust me, I already know what's gonna happen after I put this video out in the ecosphere. I'm gonna have a bunch of assholes in my comments that are like, do you not remember that wreck you pulled up at episode 5, series 1, level 69, and that rock said, did you lick the butthole tight enough? Did it splooge in your mouth? Because that actually talks about how the cosmos affects the dark fantasy world on CB220. I didn't see any of that. I'm gonna be honest with you. There's probably a bunch of weird story nuggets dropped throughout this son of a bitch, and I probably missed them. And that is one crucial, huge, fatal mistake that a ton of these indie FPS games make. It's not just a medieval who does this. I just think a medieval is the most egregious of it. And trust me, I know that the third-person action games that are kind of just the default same shit we've seen for the last 5 years and are boring as shit are doing the same thing but an opposite. They just have everybody talking to you every 2 seconds. You got like God of War where you got a head on your leg, you got your son next to you, you got the God of War talking to you. Everybody's talking and you never get any like calm airtime. There's never ever any peace to be had in these third-person action games at this point. But then you go to the indie FPS scene and there's just nothing. I would love to have a fucking talking head just maybe give me some little tidbits of what's going on here, or maybe just this quick standardized nice flash artwork cutscene, anything to keep me going, because the only thing you really get is at the very beginning and the very end, and you're never really giving any context of what's going on other than, ooh, bad guys are messing with the cosmos, so you better go kill the bad guys. And you're like, okay, well, what else? And that's it. I mean, even Quake 1 has more to it. And that game was basically just run through dungeons, kill stuff, and eldritch horrors are happening. It's never anything too great, but at least it tried a little more than what's going on here. I feel like here it's just nothing. It's a bunch of nothing. It's cool level design, cool weapons, cool everything else, but no story, no substance. Which is fine when it comes to most of these FPS games that take you like 5 hours to beat. This game is like 8.5 hours if you know where everything's at. So you're looking at like 10 to 12 probably in a first playthrough, maybe even 15. And that is so fucking long and egregious when you have nothing to hold the story together, when you have nothing but just great level design. Yes, gameplay is king, and I will fucking talk about how great this game is in every other aspect. But there's a certain point when you hit about 4.5 hours into this bitch, and you're on the same level, all of your weapons have been taken away, and you start the whole son of a bitch over, and you're like, why though? Fucking why am I doing any of this? What does this even matter? Yes, everything's cool, the enemy design's perfect, the level design's perfect, but what the fuck am I doing? What's the goddamn point? Anything to keep me fucking moving forward. And it sucks too, because all I want is an immaculately cool fucking FPS in a dark fantasy world, and this is the closest I'm gonna get in the modern era, because what am I gonna play? Immortals of Avion? No, fuck no. This gameplay will keep you fucking going. It's something you can at least keep coming back to and have fun with. Immortals of Avion deserves to be shot out of a fucking gun into the atmosphere and then forgotten about for all eternity. And I know you're probably even there, even the people who aren't deep into the lore of this game, the other people who are like, well, it's just an FPS game. That's the problem. That's the mindset that pisses me off on a fucking daily basis, that people act like FPS games aren't actually good modern art games. You look at some of the best stories told in video games, from Halo 2 to Black Ops 1, and you just see it. Also, the fucking BioShock games, all of them have these great in-depth stories. And yet, modern games are like, oh, let's just boil it back to the 90s. Why can't you utilize the greatness and the style of these 90s FPS games and then add a story in too? And I understand that making cutscenes is very difficult and demanding, but at the same time, I look at Chasm the fucking Rift and how they just had one guy sitting there shaking his head like he was getting skull fucked and telling you an exposition dump, and I even gave that game credit for trying something. And I know what you're thinking, well, they gotta hire voice actors in this. No, they don't. Just have one of the developers slap it in there and then just start talking. Or there's probably 800,000 YouTubers who are covering FPS games that are a quick fucking message away from being in your game. I'm sure that they would love to do it, and then they would push it to their fans like they were pushing milk out of a milk udder from a cow. Just 8.5 hours of silence while you're doing this is a little wild. I mean, just a voice protagonist sometimes is enough. Sometimes that's just the push that'll push you over into a new thing, because I'd much rather play Duke Nukem than I would fucking Hexen, because at least I know in Duke Nukem he's gonna be spouting out awesome one-liners throughout the entire game. And usually those one-liners are giving me some sort of purpose. I'm trying to save the babes, even though I really don't save any babes. Still something to push the game forward and add atmosphere to something that's already pretty atmospheric. I mean, when I play Duke Nukem 3D, I feel like I'm Duke Nukem. I feel like I'm there. I understand what I'm doing. Same with Ion Fury. Same with Shadow Warrior and Blood as well. You have all of these aspects working together, the atmosphere, the dialogue, all these things working together, and there's not long cutscenes in any of those other games. It's mainly just the idiot main character spousing out bullshit the whole time, but it makes it feel like it's necessity. It makes it feel like you're doing something of purpose. And I know I've harped on this a long time, but I haven't played an FPS game with this much atmosphere, with this much great gameplay, with everything going right for it. But I just get bored because it's nothing else for me. There's nothing else for me to bite onto. And even just a voice protagonist would have at least given me some idea of what was going on, because there are so many cool moving elements throughout this game, including the boss fights, which are some of the best boss fights in gaming. Matter of fact, I would go as far to say that if you were making an FPS game and you've got a couple of games under your belt and you want to really push boss fight design, you need to play a Medieval. You need to look at how they created each one of these bosses, because these are are as good as Dark Souls bosses, and I'm not even capping on that. I'm not putting my little wiener out on display to tell you lies here. This is some of the best boss fights you will ever fight in an FPS game, hands down, in terms of diversity, in terms of play styles, in terms of some of them, how you need to actually figure out how to defeat them in certain ways, as well as trying to make you utilize every single tool at your disposal and how do you move around the environment. At every second, they're taking every single aspect you've learned from the game and putting it on display, having you go hog wild and experience every great moment that you've learned up until this point. I mean, there's even boss fights that the arena itself is its biggest danger to the enemy. There's one in particular that was one of my favorite boss fights I've ever played, and you run up on the boss and he just like comes out of this giant red pillar of like lava, and you use these buttons to pour acid on him so you can create damage on him in between those moments. It's awesome. It's perfect. Everything about it sends shivers up your spine and then back down your spine to your butthole. We're talking about some real clit-shakingly good content right here, and that's where it hurts me so much more when I get to these boss fights. I'm like, oh, I want some backstory. I want to know what's going on here. I want to know the lore behind this guy because they're so cool. That's something you get with the Souls-like games, is you get the lore behind them if you're willing to look hard enough. And I looked around and it doesn't really give me that type of shit. Yes, are they perfectly designed? Yes, is the environment itself awesome and cool? And there's even some boss fights that are insanely hard because you have to fight against the environment itself because you're on like floating pillars and stuff, and at any moment you can fall to your death and the boss fight's over and you have to start again. Like, I remember the sun guy. The sun guy was a little bullshit because he would hone in on you and just like butt crack you to death over and over again because he had like too good of a honing on. But for the most part, like the environment and moving around to these little pillars, it was really fun and well designed. And my thought is, ooh, I would love to learn a little bit of backstory about him. I would love if right before this the guy was saying like, I gotta kill the sun god, he's such a piece of shit, I hate the way that he looks at me, I hate the way that he thinks he can control all beings in the universe, or something, just a little bit of something, or just anything, having the boss say a few things to you, or a cutscene right before that like plays his importance, just something small that I can grab onto. That's one of the things that a game that's actually not as good as this, Forgive Me Father, in terms of gameplay, I think this is a much better playing game than Forgive Me Father. I mean, close, but I know Forgive Me Father kept me a reason to wanting to fight further and further, so when I got to those cool boss fights, I had like a little context behind them, even if it wasn't the most overly written, like posh bullshit Kino gay lord thing in the world. It still had some really cool stuff leading up to it, to where I knew what was going on, and I couldn't wait to get into that boss fight. Same what goes with Dusk. Dusk didn't have a ton of story pushing the gamer in the right direction, but it had enough of a concept, enough of a small idea, where you're locked into this town because of all of the cult activities and the cosmic terrors that you're trying to get to the middle of it for treasure. At least that's cool enough to keep you killing shit, and you're like, when you get to the cool stuff at the end, it all builds to a grander spectacle. This, when it gets to the big spectacle at the end, you're like, ah, cool, but I've fought like 6 other spectacles. It's a fun boss fight, it's cool looking, I'm having a blast, but at the same time, you feel like you're just going through the motions. And every section of the game kind of has that same problem. It takes all your weapons away, you're slowly drip fed the weapons again through each little contained area, and then you get to a boss fight, and you do it over and over and over again without really any cause. And while you're doing it, sure, this is one of the best gameplay experiences I've ever felt. Sure, the guns are all perfect and actually well made, and I would recommend this game to absolutely anybody in terms of gameplay. There isn't a weapon in this game that I think's actually bad. The sword is fun to use. The first little plasma staff thing that locks on like a needle or bolt, that thing's awesome. It upgrades into a trident that will like make people blow up and then cause damage over a space. You have one of the coolest weapons ever, which is like this spike launcher thing that throws like giant spikes, and then when it gets powered up, it just hurls like tracking spikes. Awesome. Everything's awesome, and everything has a super upgraded variant. It's all amazingly well crafted to the point of near goddamn perfection. I mean, if you were going if you were just having sex, this would be orgasm material, except for it doesn't have any of the foreplay. So you're just banging away constantly, just power slapping against some cheeks, but you never really have any like build up. and fun into it. Yeah, that's great when you've been out on a bender and you're tore up and you just are like, yeah, we're just gonna have sex, and you wake up the next morning, you're still wearing the condom, you're like, damn, that must have been good, and it probably was, but there's nothing better than just like slowing in with a girl that you actually care about or a guy you actually care about, and you're just like leading in, and you're just having that intimate moment in that build up to something that is incredibly special. And that's what most of the time a game like this, if it had that build up, would be absolutely perfect. And I don't think anything could compare to it, especially in terms of the indie boomer shooter scene, because every single thing that I have a problem with in other FPS games, like one great example of this would be like Daikatana. I felt like the weapon variety in Daikatana was there, and even some of the cool looking weapons like didn't function really great. Everything functions perfect in this game. I have no complaints in terms of enemy design. Every new section has a little bit different enemy design in how they function, and they're all willing to kick your ass at any moment. It's perfect. Everything is so well crafted. The eye to detail is right there. All that needed to really push it over that edge to become a perfect, immaculate game would be like a small cutscene. If you went into like your section right before you go into one of these doors, if it just gave you a readout of this is the problem, you are the galactic savior of this dark fantasy world, and before each section it gave you a little rundown of what was happening in this little spin-off universe, what's going on, and you can get context on why you are a powerful enough being to hold a staff that literally shrinks Earths and then fires them as a rocket launcher. And I hope that this isn't turning you off. I hope that you're not thinking, wow, King Jiffy's just a hater. He hates everything. He sits in a little closet and jerks it with anger every night, because I don't. I went into this game and I had a fun time through every single level. When I went in and did all the platforming, did all the fun stuff, all the intense challenges that this game brings, I loved them all. I had an absolute blast. And I think that everyone should own this game. They should pick it up. It's usually on sale. I think anything that New Blood puts its hands on becomes an instant masterpiece in at least some regard. And this game is a perfect modern interpretation of a Hex and Heretic style game. It's perfect. I don't have to go back to those old games because I have a medieval. It just wish that they would have amplified it a little bit more, that they would have added a little more to it. Now, maybe they did in the DLC. Maybe the DLC has some context or a cutscene to give me some bridge, something to latch onto to really like push into the vibes and fully explore. And eventually maybe I'll explore it on this channel. I just have to say I was a little burnt out by the end when you do the same thing over and over again, and I get it. That's how all games are. Doesn't matter what game you play, what genre it's in, you will get to a point in the game where you've done the same thing so much that you get a little tired, especially when there's not much of a story to keep you pushing forward. With all my praise, you might also be wondering, why am I have so much vitriol now? Why am I so angry? Well, it all came down to the very end of the game. After you beat the final big bad, you get sent to this heaven area, this beautiful, gorgeous, green with pillars and a giant, beautiful skybox, and all these people are sitting around this fire, and it dawned on me right then, because they're talking to you, and you feel like there's something behind each one of these characters, and you're intrigued to learn about them. Who are they? What do they mean? They're like, you did a good job, champion. You've saved us all. And I finally figured out what had been eating at me this entire experience. There's nothing. And now when I get to this big moment, it doesn't feel like a big moment because there's nothing leading up to it. They're just fucking there. They don't matter. You could have had one person standing at the end who had been bright and shiny with absolutely no character design to say, hey, good job there, Chief. You killed all the bad guys. Congratulations. You are now done. And the game would have ended the same way. I feel like there's something missing. It was this missing piece, and it's eaten me away ever since putting this game down, leaving me with incredibly contradicting thoughts on, do I hate the game? No, I loved every moment of the gameplay itself. But am I annoyed because it says you can now rest now, champion? Your job is done. And it's like, well, what was the job? What was the goddamn job? Was it just killing shit in the universe? Cool, I accomplished it. What does it mean? What does any of this mean? What were all of these gorgeous levels and all this atmosphere? What was it for? Why was I doing it? It sucks because they put so much effort in, because everything's so perfect. Every little single detail throughout this entire experience is perfect. absolutely to the T. Why wouldn't you want to add some context to what's going on? Why wouldn't you want to add like something small to really make these moments pop even more than they already do? When you put so much time and energy and perfect level design into this game, why wouldn't you do that? It drives me up a wall. It's just why this game's so perfect in every regard. Why didn't you do it? It drives me so insane. It eats at the back of my mind. It's like having an STD. I can't remember which one. Syphilis, I think, where you're just sitting there losing the parts of your mind that think critically, and now are becoming this little vegetable of happiness. The game would do that to me over and over again, and then it would just wake up. I would get the cure to syphilis, and I'd be back to realizing, why didn't they add this in? Why didn't they take that little extra step to make this game fully stand out and pop above everything else? Make that perfect dark fantasy FPS game that I know the world is dying to play. But I guess things are just gotta be at rest. I mean, you have to look at the game as is, and as is, I would give the gameplay a 10 out of 10. I would give the atmosphere a 10 out of 10. I'd give the platforming a 10 out of 10. The weapon design, 10 out of 10. Boss design, 10 out of 10. Everything across the board, 10 out of 10. Story, a 0 out of 10. Absolute negative 1 out of 10. Negative 5,000 out of 10. It's just, it hurts me. It hurts me in a way that it really shouldn't. And I'm sure that I'm going to upset a lot of people with this, that at the end of the day, a game that should have been perfection is just a step above mid. And that sucks, because I love every aspect. I really do. This sits at the overall because of how bad and nothing of a story it was, and how perfect everything else is. It's going to set it like a 7 out of 10 for me. 8 out of 10, maybe. I mean, the gameplay's enough to put it to an 8 out of 10. I just wish there was more. I really wish there was more. Let me know in the comments. How is the DLC? Does the DLC give me the context I'm dying to see? Does it give me something to really bite onto and understand this world and get a little bit more peace? Because this world is perfect. I want to know every aspect of it. I truly do want to live in the depths of this world and see what it truly is. I think that there is something magical here, and if they were just to add a little bit more, sprinkle a little bit more magic throughout this gameplay experience, it would have felt more than just a game filled of a bunch of different levels, because that's what it feels like now. It feels like 8 hours of doing the same thing in different level design, which is great, it's perfect, but there's nothing keeping me to it. I mean, I could drop this game, come back a month later and play it and not really feel like I missed anything, which is honestly pretty cool. It's something cool to have, because everybody needs those games that they can hop in and out of. I mean, I remember when I played, what was that game? Neon White, and there was too much story. There was too much shit. It was trying too hard with the anime stuff, and I ended up playing it as just a game I could pop in and out of. And it sucks when I look at Neon White, where there's too much shit going on, and then I look at another indie game, a Medieval, and it has the exact opposite problem. And I feel like if you took the same approach that Neon White did by adding in this weird little like cutscenes that are just paper pieces getting slapped on screen, the way Cortana shows up in my videos, it would honestly be much better. It would have something. Or even if it had like a fucking 343 Guilty Spark like character that floated around telling you that you were a bitch the whole time, that would have at least been something. I know I keep coming back to it. I know that I've been repetitive in this video, and I've been trying to be a little better about not being that way, and not being as much of a taint salad monster that has just kind of gripes on the internet. But this one hurt me in a way. I don't know why I let it hurt me so much. I let it kick my puppy and ruin my day, have the rain come down and my eyes water to an unnecessary degree, more than a pussy's ever gotten wet because of seeing me. But at the same time, it is something that is living with me and eating me away since thinking about making a video for this experience. But that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you at least enjoyed the video, found some of my taint jokes a little bit funny. I do have gorilla nipples, which is a weird thing that I'm adding at the end of this. Until next time, I love you all, and deuces.